I did. Just went to sleep. Back up. That's why I'm a little late. Sorry about that.
الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين وعلى آله وأصحابه أجمعين. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran, وَجَعَلْنَا بَعْضُكُمْ لِبَعْضٍ فِتْنَةً أَتَصْبِرُونَ, that we have made some of you a test for others. Every relationship is going to be tested, whether it's a marriage, a friendship, it doesn't matter, business relationship. Every relationship is going to be tested. And if you notice in the ayat, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said that we have made some of you a test for others. Won't you be patient? All right, because the goal of a healthy relationship is not to separate. It's not to end in separation. It requires one to be patient. You know, somebody that you are in a relationship with, whether a friend, whether a spouse, whether a business partner, they are going to test you. They have to. They have to. Because then how would you know the strength of that relationship? How would you know the sincerity of that relationship other than the fact that it has to be tested? You are in a friendship with someone. You and your companion, you and your man, you guys are cool, you're friends. At some point in that relationship, the sincerity of that relationship has to be tested. So you might fall into a disagreement. And then what do you do after that disagreement? Do you separate from each other because of a simple disagreement or even a major disagreement? Do you separate and distance yourself from one another? Then the relationship wasn't sincere. If that small incident that caused you guys to fall into a disagreement was enough to break you apart, then the sincerity of the relationship wasn't there from the beginning. The Prophet ﷺ, he said that there will be 7 people that will be shaded by Allah on a day where there will be no shade except the shade of Allah. And from amongst those 7 people were 2 people who love each other for the sake of Allah. رَجُلَانِ تَحَابَّ فِي اللَّهِ, 2 people who love each other for the sake of Allah. He said, اجتمع عليه وتفرق عليه. They unite upon the love of Allah and they separate upon the love of Allah. Meaning, when they depart from this world, when one of them leaves this world, he only leaves this world departing from his companion based upon the love of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Meaning, when you love someone for the sake of Allah, that is the single thread that connects all relationships together, and that is the love for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And if it is truly love for the sake of Allah, then a small incident like this or that would not separate it. And this is how we know that many of our relationships, especially in the African American Muslim experience, many of our relationships were not based upon sincerity. It was, we attend the same masjid, you know, our wives are cool with each other, or, you know, for sisters, our husbands are cool with each other. And we built a friendship that was based upon superficial things. And the love of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala was not necessarily a factor in that. Evidenced by the fact that when that relationship was tested, we weren't able to stand the test of time. The love of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala was not enough to keep us together. It wasn't sincere. It wasn't sincere. The Prophet ﷺ, he said, I swear by the one in whom I swear by the one in whose hands my soul is in. No 2 people separate from one another except that one of them is committing sins. That means that the hearts of those 2 people were united upon obedience to Allah. And this is another factor in our relationships, that we are both equally yoked by our obedience to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And when one of them deviates from that, the heart begins to deviate from that person. And you look at, for example, let's look at a relationship, husband and wife. How many times is a husband and wife's relationship going to be tested? Sometimes it's tested through finances, financial hardship, difficulties in the relationship. the marriage has to be tested to prove the sincerity. Because if you manage to get over this hump, that hump, and still manage to be together even after all of those difficulties, then suffice it to say, your relationship was sincere. It was sincerely based upon the love of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. I'll give you an example. Hadith on the authority of Abdullah ibn Abbas collected in Sahih al-Bukhari, where Prophet Ibrahim alayhi salam, we know that he took Ismail and his mother Hajar to Mecca, and he left them in the valley. That was the ayahs that I read in Salatul Fajr. All right, and he left them there, and he took his other wife Sarah, and he took her to Palestine, and he spent most of his time there with her, and of course she gave birth to Ishaq, and he raised them there, and then he eventually left them and then went back to Mecca to go visit Hajar and Ismail. When he went to, in this particular incident, when he went to go visit Ismail, Ismail was an adult now. All right, Hajar had found the water of Zamzam. We know the story, running back and forth between Safa and Marwa. Angel Jibreel comes down, strikes the earth with his wing. The water of Zamzam, begins to spring from the ground, which it still does to this day, from the ground. They don't know where it comes from, just flowing from the ground, right? And this also, if you think about the story of Hajar and how what she did was she went and she started putting rocks around where the water was, and she created a well to preserve and safeguard that water. And that was through the dua of her husband, Prophet Ibrahim alayhi salam. When Ibrahim left them there, he went behind a mountain and he made dua for them. All right, we know the story. Like, he didn't want to leave his family there. That was just another test. Here again, their relationship was being tested. When Ibrahim alayhi salam walked away from his wife and his child, newborn child, Hajar said to him, "Ila aina ya Ibrahim, where are you going? Are you going to leave us here?" And Ibrahim never turned around. He kept walking, because you're a man, you leaving your family, you can't even look them in the face. And she said, "Ila aina ya Ibrahim, where are you going? You're going to leave us here?" And then she, in her mind as a woman, she knew that the husband wasn't just abandoning her. Here again, that relationship, right? She's looking at his action, and she deduces from that, there's no way that you are going to leave me and your newborn child in the valley of Mecca with no growth, vegetation, no nothing. And this is just on your doing. So she asked him, she said, "Allahu amraka bihadha?" Did God command you to do this to me? And Ibrahim nodded in approval. So she said, "Idhab idhan, fa inna Allah la yudayya'na." She said, "Then go. Because if Allah commanded you to do this, then I know Allah got us. Allah would never abandon us." You see the relationship being tested, but the sincerity was there. Sometimes women see their husbands going through struggle, through hardship, and they never factor in Allah is testing us. They interpret the husband's financial difficulties and tests as some type of negligence on his behalf. You follow me? It's like, well, you need to go get another job. It's like even if I got another job right now, that does not mean that we are going to get out of the financial bind that we're in. When Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala restricts our wealth for a particular period of time, it's to test us. And even going to get another job doesn't necessarily mean that we are going to wiggle our way out of this hole. You understand? All the resources in the world does not exempt you from the test of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It'll be one thing or another. Because you might go out, get another job to bring yourself out of this financial deficit, and in getting another job, you dig yourself in a deeper hole. So sometimes, and I'm not saying that we should just sit and do nothing, but what I am saying is that from a spiritual lens, we should be able to interpret the times in which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is restricting us. We know that from the time that we are created to the time that we die, all of our rizq, all of our provision has been, written for us. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives us that provision, intermittently throughout our lives. He doesn't give it to us all in one time. If you think from a person who was born from 1 years old until 70 years old, within that time span, all right, how much money has that person come across in their entire lives? Maybe 3 million, 4 million, 5 million, but Allah doesn't give it to you all at one time. He gives it to you in intervals, a little bit here, a little bit there, a little bit here, a little bit there, and then he withholds it for a period of time because you're not going to use up all of the provision that he has prepared for you, right, within that span. So he withholds it, he restricts it, not just because of that, but also because he wants to test you to see what you're going to do. Your relationship with God has to be tested. If we believe that our relationship with our spouse, our relationship with our friends, our relationship with our business partners are going to be tested, so will your relationship with God be tested. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran, in the second ayat of Surah Ankabut, Surah number 29, do people think that they can say they believe and they will not be tested? Do you think that you can say you believe in God and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is not going to test you? He's going to test you. Your relationship with God has to be tested. And why is Allah testing your relationship? Is it that he doesn't know? No, but he knows, but he is exposing everything that you say about your relationship with God, he's exposing to people. So when you say, I love God, or I love Allah, Allah is in my heart, I put Allah before everything, God before everything, right? Allah is going to test you to that. Because he's going to test you to show the people whether or not you are truthful in what you're saying or whether you are lying. As Allah mentions at the end of the ayah, that Allah will make it known. Those of you who are, sincere in your statement, I believe in Allah, from those of you who are not sincere. He's going to distinguish. لِيَمِيزَ اللَّهُ الْخَبِيثَ مِنَ الطَّيِّبِ. As Allah says in another ayah, that Allah will distinguish the khabith, those who are foul, and that's literally the meaning of the word khabith, something that is foul. He will distinguish those of you who are foul from those of you who are good, wholesome, tayyib, right? So even our relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is going to be tested. So in that very moment, Hajar says to Ibrahim, did Allah command you to do this? And he nods in approval. And she said, then go. Because Allah is not going to command you to leave us and then not take care of us. When Allah gives us a command to do something, he is also, one of his names is Al-Mawla, that Allah is also our guardian. So when he commands us to do something that requires some type of hardship, he also is our guardian and protector to make sure that within us carrying out that command, we don't destroy ourselves, we don't hurt ourselves. He provides cushion for us. You know what I mean? God provides cushion. He commands you to do something, but then in the process of you carrying out that commandment, he also provides the cushion for that, knowing our weaknesses as human beings. The Prophet, Allah says in the Quran, وَخُلِقَ الْإِنسَانُ ضَعِيفًا, that the human being was created weak. We have a plethora of weaknesses, and Allah knows that. So when he gives us a command to do something, he already knows that there is some mashaqqa, some difficulty in that command, and he provides the cushion for us. He provides us with patience, right? He provides us with, the spiritual fortitude. He provides us with the cushion that we need. So she said, go. Because if Allah commanded you to do that to us, la yudayyitna, he's not going to leave us. Allah says in the Quran, وَمَا مِن دَابَةٍ فِي الْأَرْضِ إِلَّا عَلَى اللَّهِ رِزْقُهَا, that there is no creature on earth except that it is God's responsibility to provide for them. That's his job. So if he commanded you to do something that requires a loss of provision for some time, he's going to pick up the slack. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is going to pick up the slack. God is going to pick that up for you. All right? So he leaves and he takes Hajar and he goes to Palestine, leaves them there. He comes back after some time. But the point that I was going to make with that was that when Hajar running back and forth between Safa and Marwa, right, looking for food for her child, and that shows that even when a woman is abandoned by a man, not saying that Ibrahim abandoned her, because he didn't. That was upon a commandment from God. But in our time, when women get put in situations where, the husband leaves, or the husband abandons her, or the husband neglects her, as a woman, you still got to do what you got to do. You understand? You're not going to just sit around and say, oh, woe is me, and wallow in your self-pity. What did Hajar do? She told him, go. If God told you to do this, then you go. Does that mean that I'm going to stop doing what I need to do for me and my child? Absolutely not. She ran between Safa and Marwa multiple times looking for food and water for her child. That means that the work doesn't stop. You have some women who are ready to just give up everything because the husband abandoned her, the husband neglected her, the husband divorced her. So I'm just going to give up. You can either be a victim, or you can, be a victor. There's two things that you can be in this world. You could be a victim. Oh, woe is me. He divorced me. He left me. He did this to me. He did that to me. Or you could be a victor. You can be triumphant despite your circumstances. And as we know that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sent angel Jibreel, he hit the earth with his wing, and out of that earth came what we know today as the water of Zamzam. Hajar, what she did was, this is the resource that Allah is providing her with. It becomes now your responsibility to preserve that resource. We work for our last name, not the first name. That's your resource. You understand? Your last name is your legacy. That is your resource. Put the rocks around it and preserve that, because your legacy is what is going to assist your children. Whether that legacy is financial, whether that legacy is social status, whether that legacy is, a great reputation in the community that your children can, live off of. You were a person who died in good standing with people, and your children will inherit that reputation that you left behind. We hustle for the last name, not the first name, not the title. Doctor this and doctor that, or Fulan this and Fulan that. No, we work for the last name. Oh, you such and such's boy? Oh, your father was a very honorable dude. Your father had integrity. Your father moved with caution. I have a lot of respect for your dad. I have a lot of respect for your mom. And as a result of that, it is extended to the children on the strength of the sacrifices that the parents made. You guys follow me? And so Hajar, what she did was she put rocks around the water so it wouldn't just continue to create, loose water, an oasis or whatever. She built a well around that. That was the provision that Allah was providing her with, that Ibrahim made dua for. When he walked away in Surah number 14, Surah Ibrahim, he made dua. And in that dua, he said, وَرْزُقُهُم مِّنَ الثَّمَرَاتِ لَعَلَّهُمْ يَشْكُرُونَ. Provide for my family. Provide for them so that perhaps they may be grateful to you. That although I didn't leave them with much, I left them with a water skin and a few dates, that's going to run out. And that means that as a man, no matter how much we provide for our families, it might not be enough. And then what that means is that we want our families, our wives and our children to not see us as their provider. I am not your provider. No matter how much Allah has blessed me with the ability to go out and work, I'm still going to fall short because I am not your provider. I am the facilitator. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is Ar-Razzaq. Allah is the provider. God is your provider. And that's what he wanted his family to understand. He said, لَعَلَّهُمْ يَشْكُرُونَ. Perhaps they may be grateful to you. I left them with a water skin and a few dates. They're going to run out. And then they're going to have to rely on you. And when you provide for them, then perhaps they'll show gratitude to you. As the Prophet ﷺ said, that Allah is the giver. I am al-Qasim. I just distribute. Wallahu al-Mu'ti wa ana al-Qasim. He said that Allah is al-Mu'ti. Allah is the giver, the provider. I am Qasim, meaning I just distribute what Allah gives me. You understand? And not to mention his name was Abu Qasim, one of his children, sons was named Qasim. But he was trying to explain to his companions that what I distribute comes from Allah, not from me. Not from me. I'm just the one that is distributing it to you. But the giver is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You guys follow me? Ibrahim wanted his family to understand his position as a man, that I can leave you with resources, but that might run out. You still got to rely on God. The reliance on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will never be removed by the provision that the husband provides. You understand? I hope you guys are paying attention to this. So when she puts the rocks around the water of Zamzam, she creates a well. Now, travelers traveling in the desert, how are they able to tell that there's water? They look up in the sky and they see crows. They see, these scavengers, these birds. And when you see birds flying around in the desert, it's only one of two things. Either they found water or there's a carcass, a dead animal or something there. You understand? So the travelers, they look up and they see birds flying around this particular area. It must be water, or they're flying over a dead carcass. So the caravan moves closer to where the birds are, and they find this well with water. You can do a lot with water. You understand? You can begin growing things. Things will grow when there's water. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran, وَجَعَلْنَا مِنَ الْمَاءِ كُلَّ شَيْءٍ حَيٍّ, that I made everything from water. Everything was created from water. The majority of our body is liquid, water. You understand? وَجَعَلْنَا مِنَ الْمَاءِ كُلَّ شَيْءٍ حَيٍّ. We've made everything that is alive with water. Very important. So the caravan comes to where the birds are and they find this well. Who's in charge of the well? Hajar. She's the first entrepreneur. You understand? Yeah, no, this is a fact. She's an entrepreneur. So the caravan is like, hey, can we get some of your water? She's like, well, what do you have to bargain with? You understand? There wasn't no money or currency. So what are we going to do? We're going to trade. You see how that works? I'll give you some of my water. You give me some of your goods. You got dates. You got wheat, barley. You got some things that we can cook. Because you can't really do nothing with just, dry material. But we mix some wheat and barley with water. We can make some bread. We can make a whole bunch of other things. You know what I mean? We can make a sweet drink. We can make a lot of things with water. So she had the resource. And she began trading. So other caravans come through. She's trading with them water. I give you some of my water. You give me this. And so what happens is the caravan decides we're going to settle here. Because with this water, we can mix the sand and we can actually make bricks. And we can build homes with this water. You see how? SubhanAllah, man. When you reflect on this joint, man, it's enough to show you how powerful Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is to put you in a position to be powerful. She built an entire community on water, Zamzam water. This is the backstory of Zamzam water. So the next time you go to Saudi Arabia, you have an opportunity to, get to the Kaaba. You have an opportunity to sit from the well of Zamzam. I want you to ponder and reflect on this, man, because it's so deep. So the caravan decides to stay. They build homes. They build a whole entire community. And this is the way the community in Mecca began. This is where the Arabs got their start from. This woman, here again, the woman at the center of the community. Here again. So her son, Ismail, begins to grow. Ismail ends up marrying a woman from that tribe. And it was through Ismail marrying a woman from that tribe that years later was going to come the final messenger, Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. From that, all because of Hajar and what she did. Because had she not did what she did with the well of Zamzam, perhaps the caravan would have, not seen the need to settle there. We could have taken the water that we needed and kept it moving. But this was also from the dua of Ibrahim. He said, وَجَعَلْ أَفْئِدَةً مِنَ النَّاسِ تَهْوِي إِلَيْهِمْ, and make the hearts of the people that see my family incline towards them. That was also part of his dua. You know, the social fabric of our community, that's a necessity. We are social creatures by nature. We cannot exist by ourselves. So he said, make the hearts of people that come across my wife and my child, make them inclined towards my wife and my child. The social fabric. So Prophet Muhammad SAW actually ended up coming from the lineage of Ismail, while all of the other prophets and messengers comes from the lineage of Ishaq in Palestine, right? Dawood, Sulaiman, you know, Isa, they all come from that lineage, while Prophet Muhammad SAW comes from the lineage of Ismail. So Ismail marries, let me get to my point. Ismail marries a woman from that tribe. Ibrahim comes back to visit his son, who's now an adult, married. And Ibrahim is an old man. You know, his wife gave birth to Ismail, who was the firstborn. Gave Ismail gave birth to him when he was, I believe, 86, and gave birth to Ishaq, or whichever one was born first, at 99. So he was an old man when he gave birth to these kids, when his wives gave birth to these kids. So he comes back years later, old man, and he goes to visit Ismail. He knocks on the door. Ismail's wife comes to the door. And without announcing who he is, he says, you know, where's your husband? She said, he's out earning our living, going to get provision. He said, how is your living situation? Pay attention. He never tells her who he is. He just begins to ask her questions. Because if you let a person talk long enough, they'll tell you everything you need to know. And when Allah shows you who a person is, believe him. He begins asking questions. How is your living situation? She said, we don't have this, we don't have that, you know, we're poor, we don't complaining, or whatever the case may be. So Ibrahim says to her, when your husband comes home, give him the greeting of salam from me and tell him to change his threshold. The carpet in front of your door, the welcome mat, tell him to change his welcome mat. Why did he refer to the woman as the welcome mat? Because before anybody comes in contact with the home, they come in contact with the mom. And if the mom gives the impression that what is being provided is not enough for her, then that says a lot about her, a lot about her relationship with her husband. So Ibrahim says, give him the greeting of salam when he comes home and tell him to change his threshold. Mind you, she doesn't know who she's talking to, and she doesn't understand the metaphor, coded language that men understand. So Ismail comes home and he asks his wife, did someone come by here today? She said, yeah, some old man came by here today. He said, well, what did he say? She said, he began asking questions about our living situation. And then he told me to give you the greeting of peace and to tell you to change your threshold. So Ismail had to decode the language for her. He said, that was my father, Prophet Ibrahim. That was my father. It wasn't just some random old man, right? That was my father. Because you never even stopped to ask him who he was. You understand? You never even cared. You were so busy trying to get your narrative out that you don't have this, you don't have that. You never even cared to ask who he was. No courtesy, no respect, no nothing. I can give you the whole rundown, itemize all of the things that was wrong with that interaction. So he says, that was my father. And when he said for me to change my threshold, that means to divorce you. Go home to your family. Their relationship was being tested with Ismail as a young man being prepared to be a prophet, right? Prophets and messengers were sheep herders. They were shepherds. The Prophet ﷺ said there was no prophet or messenger except that he used to herd sheep. It said, even you, O Messenger of Allah, he said, even me. Sheikh Muhammad ibn Salih al-Uthaymeen, rahimahullah ta'ala, he explained that the reason why prophets and messengers were sheep herders is because sheep are the most difficult animals to get to work together. You get one here, the other one jumping out, going in the other. So you run over there, you get that one. They're the most, out of all of the animals, they are the most difficult to get them to, unite and do everything in unison together so that it makes the job of the shepherd, easy. And as their sheep herding days prepares them for being prophets and messengers and dealing with sheeple, right? As a shepherd, you're dealing with sheep. And as you become a prophet and a messenger, you're dealing with sheeple, right? People who act like sheep. Very difficult. So this is why the Prophet ﷺ, as a young man, had a lot of wisdom, because they were able to derive from their job of dealing with sheep and dealing with animals. Human beings function a lot like that. As a matter of fact, as human beings, we are the highest form of animal. We have all of the impulses of animals. However, the only difference between us and them is that they function on pure instinct and we have intellect. But we still have, with that intellect, we still have, animal impulses. We have carnal desires. And we have to use our intellect in order to, control that. And if you look at children function like animals. They're primitive. When you try to take a car from a kid, he hits the other kid. That's instinctive. He's not thinking about that. Are you trying to take my car? I hit. Right? They're primitive. I'm hungry, I just start crying because I'm hungry. As you get older, you don't cry because you're hungry. As you get older, you learn how to say, I'm hungry. I can wait until I get home. I'll fast. You learn how to control that. The impulsivity, begins to decline as you get older and you mature and you understand, your faculty. You learn how to use your faculties, right, to function as an adult. But children are primitive. They act like little animals, right? So he tells her, go home to your family. That was my father. Their relationship was tested. And, she failed the test. So then he remarries. Prophet Ibrahim comes back a second time. Same incident. He asked, where's your husband? She said, he's out, earning a living for us. He says, well, how is your living situation? She says, we're fine. Alhamdulillah. We don't have much, but we're good. Grateful for the little bit that we do have. So he says, when your husband come home, give him the greeting of salam and tell him to hold tight to his threshold. Keep what you got. You got to keep her. So when Ismail comes home, he says, has someone come by today? He said, yeah. A nice gentleman. You see the language changes. A nice gentleman came by today. So what did he ask? He asked about our living situation. And he said, well, what did he say? She said, he told me to give you the greeting of salam and to hold tight to your threshold. What does that mean? Decode that language for me. And he says, that was my father. And hold tight to my threshold mean to keep you. You're a good woman. Our relationship was tested. However, you passed the test. So the point that I'm making is that, every relationship is going to be tested. Every relationship is going to be tested. Our relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is going to be tested. Our relationship with our friends are going to be tested. Our relationship, wa alaikum salam, with our spouses are going to be tested. All of our relationships are going to be tested. And you have some people who fail. You have some people who fail miserably with every single test. Their relationship with Allah is horrible. They can't keep friends, can't stay married, yet they blame everybody else. It's God's fault. My friends, they can't keep a friend. They can't keep a spouse, in and out of relationships, serial monogamy, in and out of relationships, yet it's everybody else's fault. And, at some point, you have to have an honest conversation with yourself. Why can't you keep friends? Why are you at odds with everyone that you become a friend to? You end up, breaking the friendship with the person. You can't stay married. Every marriage you go into is toxic. Your relationship with God is horrible. I mean, at some point, don't those arrows start to point back to yourself, that you have to actually take a deeper look at yourself to find out, why do you fail with every single relationship? So this is what I wanted to present, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows best, while we, sitting around waiting for everybody else to get here. I don't know if anybody had any questions or anything related to that. وصلى الله على نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم تسليما كثيرا وآخر دعوانا أن الحمد لله رب العالمين.
I want anybody, because I didn't see anybody put their hand up. But I'm going to ask a question, especially with Hajj. Because that's an interesting thing that you said, as far as the entrepreneurship and the beginning of the cultivation of that area, with the water. And even though she was doing what she do, it started with the dua, or him accepting the command of Allah.
Absolutely.
First.
Absolutely.
And doing what he's supposed to do based upon his test started first. And then her test came in behind his test.
Absolutely.
Okay.
But you can see how when Allah tests a man, he doesn't just test the man, he tests his entire family. You understand? When Allah tested Ibrahim with going to give dawah, going to Palestine and giving dawah, right? That whole situation was not necessarily just for Prophet Ibrahim, but Ibrahim was being tested so that Prophet Muhammad could be born. You understand? It's just so deep, literally, man. When you think about that whole situation, Prophet Ibrahim was commanded to leave his wife and his child there, and then go to Palestine. He's going to Palestine to give da'wah. He confronts his father, Azar. He confronts Namrud, and all of the things that happen and unfold. And all of that happened in Palestine. Meanwhile, there's a dot, over in Mecca that's going to eventually be connected to the dots that are being made in Palestine. And it's all connected. So I'm going to drop you here. I'll come back for you years later, but I got to go here in Palestine and go do this. Meanwhile, that is situation in Mecca is unfolding only so this last and final messenger can be born, generations later. You understand? So when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tests a man, he also tests his entire family.
So would that bring about looking at the name of Allah, Al-Latif? Mm-hmm. Would that be in the situation the same thing? It's like he caused something to happen so something else can take place.
Absolutely. Absolutely. He caused something to happen so something else can happen. And the thing is that sometimes Allah gives us access to that hikmah, that wisdom. Sometimes he gives us access to it, to be able to sit down in that moment and process it. I'm sure Prophet Ibrahim alayhi salam and those and Hajar and everybody that was affected, they didn't understand what was happening at that moment. They couldn't possibly understand because Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam didn't come until generations later, hundreds of years later. You understand? So that means that Allah's wisdom sometimes is so deep, it supersedes the duration of our lives, that within our lifetime, we would never be able to understand the wisdom of Allah in that portion of our lives. Allah says, Lahu hikmatu baligha. Allah has infinite wisdom. His wisdom exceeds lifespans. Sometimes something can happen in our lives, and we don't decode the wisdom of Allah in that situation until generations later. Your grandchildren will be able to look at why you did this and why you were tested with that and derive the wisdom from why that happened. And that's provided Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives them access. As Allah says in the Quran, يُؤْتِ الْحِكْمَةَ مَن يَشَاءُ, He gives wisdom to whomsoever He wills. وَمَن يُؤْتِ الْحِكْمَةَ فَقَدْ أُوتِيَ خَيْرًا كَثِيرًا. And whomever Allah has given wisdom, He has given them an abundance of good. You know, He gives you access.
So when you said hustle for your last name, or creating a legacy, he may not even knew it at the time, obviously, but he had the insight to at least make the dua to basically preserve his legacy.
Absolutely.
In that area.
Absolutely. And I don't even think he realized when he was just a man crying out to God for help in that situation, not even realizing the extent of his dua. That dua is so powerful. He said, "Oh Allah, inni askantu min dhurriyyati biwadin ghayri dhi zara." He said, "Oh my Lord, I left my children in a valley in Mecca, without any growth of vegetation, liyuqimu salat, right next to the Kaaba, so that they may establish salah." That shows you that when we relocate to an area, the first thing we're looking for is a masjid, place where I can establish my prayer. And of course, if you living in an environment and you don't have that, then your home becomes your masjid, becomes your musalla. Many of the scholars of the past, they used to have rooms in their homes that were dedicated to salah. That was their musalla. Getting up in the middle of the night, going in this particular room. It was mentioned about one of the scholars, I believe it was Sufyan al-Thawri, that when he died, his wife never went into his prayer room. But when he died, she went into his prayer room, and the carpet where he used to pray on had a hole in it from the prostrations. He prostrated so much on the carpet, it left a hole in the carpet. So he leaves them there, and to establish the salah. And then he begins to ask Allah to give them all of the things that they need, make the hearts of the people inclined towards them, provide for them so that perhaps they may be grateful. And then he begins asking Allah to give them all of the things, not realizing that all of the dua he's making is, creating a legacy that will live beyond him. I mean, it's so deep,
That's deep.
Absolutely. And I think it kind of reiterates the fact of the importance of having a good woman in your life, right?
Preach.
That is going to have that's going to be patient, remember Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and who is going to maintain your child on the straight path, and it's amazing. I don't know how people can.
No, to his point, he said that this also speaks to the point that women have a responsibility to preserve the legacy of their husband, and even in his absence, even if you're divorced, you had a child with this man, and at the time that you had the child with the man, even if your relationship with that man breaks up, and you separate, at the time that you had that child, you guys were in a good space. And you guys had plans for that child, even if the plans that you had for your relationship didn't go the way you wanted it to. And even if the husband and wife separate, the legacy of that man is still in that child, and you still have a responsibility to preserve that. And you have some women, when they are divorced, they just give up. And I'm not dismissing the pain that is associated with divorce or all of the things that lead up to divorce. But the last thing that you have to your credit is that child that was born out of that situation. And to continue investing in that child, and that perhaps that child will be able to erase a lot of the pain that was associated with the relationship with you and that child's father. Because I don't care how toxic the relationship is between a man and a woman, when a woman sees her child graduate from high school, at that moment, all of the pain that she experienced with that man is irrelevant.
You saw this child all the way through to the end. The day that male child gets married, you are the happiest woman in the world because despite, the fallout between you and that child's father, you still managed to get this kid to adulthood, get him through college, get him through high school, through college, and on into marriage, into his own life, into his own adulthood. And there's nothing that is more, satisfying than that. It makes all that other pain just go away. You can look at your child and help to erase a lot of the pain that child's father caused to you. And Hajar, she did that. Despite the fact that he left and left them there, she still had an obligation to raise that kid. And you have some women who, well, I'm going back to the church, because, like we said last night, right? The woman, she converts to Islam, she has a fallout with the husband, and now you're going to revert back to the church and take the child with you. And it's like, why would you do that to your kid, man? Would you allow your pain to drive you to that extent? That you're going to destroy this man's leg? And you have some women who do that. They can't get to the man, so they take it out on the child. They know that the man wants that child to be in Islamic school. They fight like hell. I'm not putting you in no Islamic school, blah, blah, blah. They're not doing nothing Islamic with the child. They're going to steal that away from the child because they believe that the husband stole that from them. So they're going to take it out on the child. And that only comes back to haunt you. You got to live with that. You got to live with the decision that you made, that because this man divorced me, because this man caused me all this pain and this trauma, I'm going to take it out on his kids. You got to live with that, man. Don't let your pain go so far, man, that you go from being the victim to the villain. You know what I mean? Yeah, he caused you some pain, he caused you some trauma, and you are the victim. I get it. But don't let your victimhood lead you to be a villain. Because now you the bad guy. You know what I mean?
Alhamdulillah. So, alhamdulillah, so people already showed up and they went to the place where we were committed.
Oh man.
Here, right? So, I guess, it's like 7 o'clock. I guess we can make it there so we can make it back.
Yeah.
Okay. I don't know, maybe this is all that's going to get up and go. So,
it's plenty.
Yeah, that's it.